You think her silence is weakness. You think her distance is fear. You misunderstand completely. What you are witnessing is discipline. What you are facing is clarity. And what you cannot control is a woman who has finally learned the power of her own limits. But there comes a moment in life when noise loses its charm, when constant explaining becomes exhausting, when giving endlessly feels like losing yourself piece by piece. And in that moment, she decides something different. She decides that her energy is sacred, that her time is not for everyone, that her peace is not negotiable. The boundaries are not walls built out of anger. They are doors guided by awareness. She does not close herself off because she hates the world. She chooses carefully because she finally understands her worth. Every no she speaks is a yes to her own growth. Every step back is a step deeper into herself. And you may feel uncomfortable when she no longer tolerates what she once accepted. That is not her becoming difficult. That is her becoming aware. Awareness is quiet but powerful. It does not scream. It does not chase. It simply stands firm and says, this is where I begin and this is where I end. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is the calm refusal to engage in what drains you. Sometimes strength is walking away without explanation. Sometimes strength is choosing solitude over chaos. She is no longer afraid of being alone because she has discovered something far greater than validation. She has discovered herself. And when a woman stands in that space, when she respects her own boundaries, she becomes unshakable. Boundaries protect inner peace. This is not an idea to impress others. This is a principle to live by. Because without protection, peace does not stay. It slips away quietly, taken by small compromises, constant noise, and the habit of saying yes when the heart whispers no. Many people believe peace will come when life becomes calm, when people change, when circumstances align. But peace does not come from the outside. It is built from within, and it is protected by what you allow and what you refuse. She begins to understand this not through comfort, but through exhaustion, through moments where she gave too much, explained too much, tolerated too much. She notices how her energy feels after certain conversations, how her mind becomes restless after allowing what she knew was not right. This awareness is the beginning, not loud, not dramatic, but clear. And once clarity arrives, it cannot be unseen. Alans to protect peace means to become selective, not cold, not distant, but conscious. She no longer entertains every opinion. She no longer reacts to every situation. She watches, she listens, and then she decides. This decision is not based on fear of losing others, but on respect for herself. Because every time she ignores her own limits, she pays the price internally. Her calm is disturbed. Her focus is scattered. Her sense of self becomes weaker. There is a quiet strength in choosing not to engage. When words are thrown carelessly, she does not have to catch them. When negativity approaches, she does not have to absorb it. She understands that not every battle deserves her energy. Not every person deserves access to her mind, and not every situation deserves her response. This is not avoidance. This is discipline. Discipline is often misunderstood. People think it is about forcing yourself to do more. But true discipline is also about refusing what weakens you. It is about standing firm when it would be easier to give in. It is about staying silent when the ego wants to react. It is about walking away when the heart is tempted to stay out of habit. In these moments, she protects her peace, not with aggression, but with control. Right? And control here does not mean controlling others. It means mastering herself, her reactions, her attention, her presence. Because peace is not something you demand from the world. It is something you maintain within yourself. The world will always be unpredictable. People will always act according to their nature. But she no longer depends on that. She depends on her own ability to remain centered there will be resistance. When she begins to set boundaries, not everyone will understand. Some will question her. Some will test her. Some will try to pull her back into old patterns. This is where many people fall. They confuse discomfort with wrongdoing. They think that because others feel unsettled, they must be doing something wrong. But growth often creates discomfort, not because it is wrong, but because it is different. But she does not need to explain her boundaries to everyone. She does not need to justify her choices. Her peace is reason enough. And when she stands firm, something changes within her. The noise becomes quieter. The mind becomes clearer. The energy becomes stable. She no longer feels pulled in every direction. She becomes focused, grounded, present. This is the reward of protecting inner peace. It is not isolation. It is alignment. It is the ability to move through life without being constantly shaken by external forces. It is the understanding that her well-being is her responsibility. And that responsibility requires courage, consistency, and awareness. Bunzen, because in the end, peace is not found by chance. It is kept by choice. Saying no builds self-respect. This is where many struggle, not because they do not understand its importance, but because they fear its consequences. They fear rejection. They fear conflict. They fear being seen as difficult or unkind. So they say yes when their mind is uncertain, when their energy is low, when their heart feels resistance. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin to move away from themselves. Mandia, she once stood there too, at that point where approval felt safer than honesty, where keeping others comfortable mattered more than staying true to her own limits. But over time, she started to notice something deeper. Every unnecessary yes came with a quiet cost. A heaviness in her chest, a restlessness in her thoughts, a sense that she was betraying something within. And that feeling does not disappear on its own. It grows silently until it demands attention. Mend awareness arrives again, not as a loud voice, but as a clear realization. She understands that every yes carries responsibility. It requires time, energy, presence, and when these are given without alignment, they drain her. Not because she is weak, but because she is ignoring her own truth. So she begins to pause. Before responding, before agreeing, before committing, she listens inward, and in that space, she hears something simple and honest. No. And at first, it feels uncomfortable. The word itself seems heavy, almost foreign. She may soften it, delay it, or try to explain it in many ways. But the more she practices, the clearer it becomes. No is not rejection. No is direction. It is the boundary that keeps her aligned with what truly matters. It is the filter that protects her time, her energy, her focus. People may not always welcome this change. Some are used to her constant availability. Some are comfortable with her flexibility. When she begins to say no, they may question her. They may push back. They may try to make her feel guilty. This is where her strength is tested. Not in how loudly she defends herself, but in how calmly she stands her ground. Bandus, she learns that saying no does not require anger. It does not require long explanations. It requires clarity, furtence. A calm voice, a steady presence, and most importantly, a deep understanding that her worth is not defined by how much she gives to others. Her worth is inherent. It does not increase with every yes, and it does not decrease with every no. Dense. This is the shift. When she stops measuring her value through external approval, she becomes free. Free from the need to please, free from the fear of disappointing others, free to choose what aligns with her growth. And in that freedom, self-respect begins to take root. Self-respect is not something you demand from others. It is something you demonstrate through your actions. Every time she says no to what drains her, she says yes to what strengthens her. Every time she refuses what feels wrong, she reinforces her own standards. and these standards shape her life. They define what she allows, what she accepts, what she walks away from. There is a quiet power in this. It does not seek validation. It does not need recognition. It is steady, grounded, unshaken, because she is no longer negotiating with her own limits. She is honoring them, and something else begins to change. The way others see her. When she respects her own boundaries, others learn to respect them too. Not all, but those who truly value her presence will understand. They will adjust. They will meet her at the level of clarity she now holds. And those who cannot accept her no were never aligned with her growth to begin with. She no longer fears losing people because she understands what she is gaining. Peace, focus, authenticity, a deeper connection with herself. And this connection is the foundation of everything else. Mentions. Because in the end, every no spoken with awareness becomes a declaration of self-respect. Replaces approval seeking. This is the turning point, the moment where she no longer looks outward to decide who she is. For a long time, like many, she measured herself through the reactions of others. A smile meant she was accepted. Silence meant something was wrong. Praise lifted her. Criticism unsettled her. Without realizing it, her sense of self was placed in the hands of people who were also uncertain, also changing. Travel feels safe in the beginning. It gives direction. It gives a sense of belonging. But slowly, it becomes a dependency. Decisions are no longer made from truth, but from expectation. Words are chosen carefully, not for honesty, but for acceptance. Actions are shaped not by purpose, but by the desire to be liked. And in this process, something essential is lost. The connection to self becomes weak. MBCLED. She begins to notice this pattern, not through sudden realization, but through repeated discomfort. Moments where she agrees outwardly, but feels resistance within. Times where she adjusts herself to fit into spaces that do not align with her values. The more she seeks approval, the more disconnected she feels. This contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. Awareness enters quietly. It does not judge, it does not criticize, it simply reveals. She starts to observe her own thoughts, her reactions, her tendencies. Hence, she sees how often she seeks validation before making a decision, how she hesitates to trust her own voice, how she feels uneasy when she chooses differently from what others expect. And in seeing this clearly, something shifts. She realizes that approval is temporary. It changes from person to person, from moment to moment. What is praised today may be questioned tomorrow. If her identity is built on this, it will always remain unstable. So she turns inward, not in isolation, but in understanding. She begins to ask different questions. Not what will they think, but what feels true. Not what will gain acceptance, but what aligns with who I am becoming. This shift is not easy. The habit of seeking approval is deeply rooted. It shows up in subtle ways. In the need to explain choices, in the discomfort of being misunderstood, in the urge to correct every false perception. But awareness creates space. In that space, she pauses. She observes the impulse without immediately acting on it. And in that pause, she regains control. Control here is not force, it is clarity. She sees the difference between acting from truth and reacting from fear. When she acts from truth, there is a sense of calm, even if the outcome is uncertain. When she reacts from fear, there is tension, even if the outcome brings temporary approval. This understanding becomes her guide. Then she no longer chases validation because she understands its nature. It is external, unstable, and often disconnected from reality. People project their own beliefs, their own experiences, their own limitations. Their approval is not a measure of her worth. It is simply a reflection of their perspective. And once she sees this clearly, she stops giving it power over her decisions. And there will still be moments of doubt, moments where the old patterns try to return. This is natural. Awareness does not remove challenges, it changes how she responds to them. Instead of being pulled into the need for approval, she returns to herself. She breathes, she reflects, she chooses with intention. Each time she does this, the habit weakens. Each time she trusts herself, the connection grows stronger, and something remarkable happens. The need to be understood by everyone fades. She becomes comfortable with being misunderstood by some, because she understands herself. This is the foundation. When you know your direction, you do not need constant reassurance. When you trust your path, you do not need constant validation. She becomes steady, not rigid, but grounded. Open to learning, but not dependent on approval. She listens to others, but she does not lose herself in their opinions. This balance is rare, but it is powerful. It allows her to move through life with clarity, with confidence, with quiet strength. Because in the end, awareness does not seek approval. It replaces the need for it. Energy must be guarded wisely. This is where understanding becomes practice, where awareness turns into daily discipline. Because it is not enough to know your limits. You must protect them. You must live them. Your energy is not endless. Your attention is not free. And yet, most people give both away without thought, without direction, without intention. She begins to see this clearly. Not all exhaustion comes from doing too much. Much of it comes from giving energy to what does not deserve it. Unnecessary conversations, repeated explanations, emotional involvement in situations that bring no growth. These are small leaks, almost invisible at first, but over time they drain everything. And when energy is low, clarity disappears. When clarity disappears, boundaries weaken. So she becomes more observant, not of others, but of herself, how she feels after certain interactions, what thoughts stay in her mind longer than they should, what situations disturb her inner balance. This observation is not judgment, it is awareness. And through awareness, she learns to recognize where her energy is being wasted. There is a difference between giving and losing. Giving is intentional. It comes from actions requiring attention. The world does not slow down, but she no longer feels the need to respond to everything immediately. She creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, she chooses, and that choice is guided not by pressure, but by clarity. Sometimes guarding energy means stepping back, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. It means saying no to what drains, even when it feels uncomfortable. It means limiting exposure to negativity, even when it comes from familiar places. It means protecting her peace, not only in big decisions, but in small daily moments. And there is also the discipline of silence. Not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every opinion needs to be shared. Words carry energy. When used carelessly, they scatter focus. When used with awareness, they become precise and meaningful. She learns to speak less but with intention, to listen more but without absorbing everything. Guarding energy also means giving it to what matters: growth, learning, purpose, rest. She understands that rest is not a reward. It is a requirement. Without it, energy cannot be restored. Without restoration, even the strongest intentions will fail. So she allows herself to pause, not as an escape, but as a renewal. This way of living may seem strict to some. It may appear distant or controlled, but it is neither. It is balanced. It is intentional. It is aligned, because she is no longer moving randomly through life. She is directing her energy with purpose. And through this, her strength becomes consistent, not temporary, not dependent on external motivation, but steady. She does not burn out quickly because she no longer wastes herself. She does not lose focus easily because she knows what deserves her attention. Because in the end, energy given without awareness is lost, but energy guarded with discipline becomes power. Silence can be powerful strength. Not the silence of suppression, not the silence of fear, but the silence that comes from control. The silence that does not need to prove, does not need to react, does not need to fill every space with words. This kind of silence is often misunderstood. People assume that if she is quiet, she has nothing to say. But in truth, she has learned that not everything needs to be said. Manged, there was a time when she felt the need to respond to everything, to defend herself, to explain her intentions, to correct every misunderstanding. Words became her shield, but over time, she began to see that constant speaking did not always bring clarity. Sometimes it created more confusion. Sometimes it drained her energy. Sometimes it gave power to things that did not deserve it. So she started to step back, not in withdrawal, but in awareness. She began to listen more, to observe without immediate judgment, to understand before reacting. And in this space, she discovered something deeper. Silence is not empty. It is full of presence. It allows her to see what is real, beyond the noise of opinions and emotions. But there is a strength in not reacting immediately. When emotions rise, the impulse is to speak, to release, to express without control. But she learns to pause. In that pause, she regains clarity. She separates feeling from action. She chooses her response instead of being driven by impulse. This is where silence becomes discipline. Discipline, again, is not force. It is awareness in action. It is the ability to hold your ground internally without needing external validation. When she remains silent in moments where others expect reaction, it is not because she is weak. It is because she sees no value in engaging. Not every argument deserves her voice. Not every misunderstanding deserves her explanation. This does not mean she never speaks. It means she speaks with intention. When her words come, they are clear, direct, and grounded. They are not scattered or driven by emotion. They carry weight because they are not overused. Silence gives power to her voice by making it deliberate. There is also protection in silence. When she shares less, she exposes less. Not everything needs to be known by everyone. Not every thought needs to be expressed. In a world where people often speak without thinking, her restraint becomes a form of strength. She keeps her focus. She keeps her direction. She does not allow external noise to dictate her internal state. Dear, at times silence will be uncomfortable. Others may push her to speak, to react, to engage. They may interpret her quietness as indifference or weakness. This is where her awareness remains steady. She does not shape her behavior based on their expectations. She acts according to her understanding. And that understanding tells her that peace is often found in what is not said. Mangus, silence, also deepens her connection with herself. When she is not constantly speaking, she begins to hear her own thoughts more clearly. She understands her emotions without needing to express them immediately. She processes, she reflects, she learns. This inner dialogue becomes stronger than external noise. There is a calm that comes with this, a stillness that is not easily disturbed. She is no longer pulled into every conversation, every conflict, every reaction. She stands apart, not in isolation, but in clarity. She engages when it matters. She remains silent when it does not. And in this balance, her presence changes. She does not need to demand attention. It comes naturally, because people sense the control, the awareness, the strength that does not need to be displayed loudly. It is quiet, but it is undeniable. Because in the end, silence is not the absence of power. It is the mastery of it. Walking away is growth, not defeat. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because it challenges everything the ego wants to believe. The ego says, stay and prove yourself, stay and win, stay and show strength. But real strength is not always found in staying. Sometimes it is revealed in the decision to leave. Pamjance. She once believed that walking away meant failure, that it meant she was not strong enough to handle the situation, not patient enough to endure, not capable enough to fix what was broken. So she stayed longer than she should have. She gave more than she had. She tried to hold together what was already falling apart. And in that process, she lost something far more valuable than the situation itself. She lost her sense of balance. But over time, she began to see a pattern. The more she forced herself to stay in what did not align, the more disconnected she felt. Her energy dropped. Her clarity faded. Her peace became unstable. And no matter how much effort she gave, the outcome did not change. This is when awareness deepened. Not everything is meant to be fixed. Not everything is meant to be carried. And not every place is meant for her to remain. Walking away is not. Self-value defines every decision. This is the foundation beneath everything she does, everything she accepts, everything she refuses. Because without self-value, boundaries become weak, choices become uncertain, and direction becomes unclear. But when self-value is understood deeply and without doubt, everything begins to align. There was a time when her decisions were influenced by external voices. What others expected, what others approved, what others believed was right for her. She listened, she adjusted, she followed, not because she lacked intelligence, but because she had not yet recognized her own worth. And without that recognition, it is easy to place others above yourself, to give their opinions more weight than your own truth. But experience teaches in ways words cannot. Through moments of disappointment, through situations where she felt overlooked, through times when she gave everything and received little in return, she began to question, not the world, but herself. Why do I allow this? Why do I accept less than what I feel I deserve? Why do I stay where I am not valued? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of awakening. Because once she begins to ask them honestly, she cannot return to unconscious living. She starts to see the connection between her self-value and her decisions. When she sees herself as less, she accepts less. When she doubts her worth, she tolerates what does not align. When she seeks validation, she compromises her standards. So the work begins within, not in changing others, not in controlling outcomes, but in understanding herself. She learns to sit with her thoughts, to observe her patterns, to recognize where she has been undervaluing herself. This is not about blame, it is about clarity, because without clarity, change cannot happen. Self-value is not built through words alone. It is built through action, through the decisions she makes daily. When she chooses to respect her time, she reinforces her worth. When she refuses what drains her, she strengthens her standards. When she walks away from what does not align, she confirms her value. Each action becomes evidence, not for others, but for herself. There is a shift in how she sees things. She no longer asks, do they accept me? She asks, does this align with me? She no longer tries to fit into every space. She chooses the spaces that reflect her growth. This change is subtle but powerful. It moves her from seeking approval to living with intention. Self-value also brings responsibility. Because once she knows her worth, she can no longer ignore it. She cannot return to old patterns without feeling the weight of misalignment. This is where discipline becomes important. Not to force herself into perfection, but to remain consistent with what she now understands. There will be challenges. Situations that test her boundaries, people who question her standards, moments where it would be easier to lower her expectations than to stand firm. But she remembers what it felt like before, the lack of clarity, the loss of peace, the constant need for validation. And she knows she cannot go back. She also understands that self-value is not arrogance. It is not about seeing herself as above others. It is about seeing herself clearly, with strengths and weaknesses, with growth and imperfection. It is a balanced understanding, not an inflated one. And from this balance, her decisions become grounded. Others begin to notice this change, not because she announces it, but because she lives it. Her presence becomes different, more stable, more certain. She does not waver easily. She does not adjust herself to fit expectations that do not align. She moves with purpose, not with pressure. And through this, her life begins to reflect her value. The people she allows in, the opportunities she chooses, the paths she follows. Everything becomes a reflection of how she sees herself, because decisions are never random. They are always guided by what we believe we deserve. So she continues, not perfectly, but consciously, learning, adjusting, growing, but always returning to the same foundation. Her value is not defined by the world. It is defined by her understanding of herself. And because in the end, every decision you make is a reflection of what you believe you are worth. And now you see it clearly. This was never about distance, silence, or saying no. This was about returning to self, about standing in awareness when the world pulls you in every direction, about choosing peace when chaos feels easier, about valuing yourself when it would be more comfortable to seek approval. And she is not hard, she is not cold, she is not unreachable, she is disciplined, she is aware. She is aligned. Every boundary she sets, every no she speaks, every step she takes away from what drains her is not an act of rejection. It is an act of self-respect. It is a declaration that her energy, her peace, and her purpose are no longer open to everything. This is the path, quiet, steady, and powerful. Not for applause, not for validation, but for inner clarity. And when you walk this path, you will notice something. Life does not become perfect, but you become unshakable within it. So move forward with awareness. Guard your energy. Trust your silence. Choose your direction. And never forget that your strength is not in how much you endure, but in how deeply you understand yourself. And I wish you clarity in your thoughts, strength in your choices, and peace in your journey. Good luck on your path, and thank you for listening.